guilt and shame. So Amanda cut her mom off about 6 months ago. And one thing she hadn't thought about ahead of time was what she was going to do around her mom's birthday. And now her mom's birthday is actually coming up. So she's thinking, okay, what do I do here? Should I call my mom? I feel like I'd be a bad person not to call her on her birthday after all. The other part of her saying, heck no, I cut her off for a reason. And she's feeling a little bit unsure. And what's really getting to her is her relationship with guilt. She's afraid that if she doesn't call her mom, she doesn't send a card, if she doesn't do anything, she'll feel guilty, even though she had a good reason for cutting her mom off. Her mom was toxic and has a history of being abusive. Do you struggle with guilt? Do you struggle with feeling like you're doing the wrong thing, even sometimes when you're doing what's right for you, because you're concerned about how others will view it? Do you struggle with shame? Brene Brown said that guilt is like saying something is wrong, and shame is like saying I am wrong. Guilt is what I did was wrong. Shame is I am wrong. When we have unhealthy shame, toxic shame, then we actually feel unworthy. It's hard to even show up to a gathering, a party, an event because we feel so much shame. We feel like we're not on the same level with the other humans. Obviously, shame is very toxic. Now, there is untoxic shame, such as when they say in old movies, have you no shame? Like the shame that keeps you from doing something socially unacceptable and gross, like digging in your nose or scratching your underarms or something like that. So that would be like a healthy type of shame if you feel like I wouldn't want to do that because that wouldn't reflect well on me. That's a healthy type of shame. We want to feel that way. We want to have that type of shame. But what we want to avoid is being shame driven or having toxic shame. Toxic shame is feeling like you are gross. You are not good enough. You are unworthy. Trauma survivors struggle with carrying toxic shame. And it's understandably because many of them had caregivers that didn't help them to develop a proper healthy pride in themselves. And so they feel instead like they're unworthy because in the household they grew up in, they were always treated as unworthy. They feel like they're not good enough because the household they grew up in, it was never good enough for their parents. Their parents raised them to feel shame. That even used to be a saying, shame on you. But it's not healthy for us to continue through our lives as adults carrying this feeling like we are unworthy. So how do we break it? How do we get out of shame? And if you're someone who has guilt, you may have had parents that would use the guilt to control you. They would use it as like a control mechanism. They would guilt you. This is what are called guilt trips, where they give you information, they tell you things, and they tell you stories to make you feel more guilty. And that's what Amanda was experiencing. Her brothers and sisters were calling her, are you going to call mom? You can't not call mom on her birthday. What kind of daughter would you be? How would she feel? She would feel so bad. You got to let things go. You got to forgive and forget. And so they're making Amanda feel like she was being a bad person by maintaining her own healthy boundaries. So how do we get past guilt? How do we get so that we're not controlled by guilt anymore? Well, that's what we'll be discussing tonight. So what should we knock down first? Shame or guilt? Well, probably the most toxic would be shame. So let's get rid of the toxic shame first. Let's examine what's at the root of toxic shame. It's a feeling, it's a belief, maladaptive, that you are not enough, right? Or that you're too gross or too ugly or too worthless, that you're not good enough, that you should feel less than everyone else, right? How would you describe your shame? You can write it in the chat. How would you describe your shame? It's a feeling that you are someone who just does not measure up. Not enough. Anyone else? How would you describe your shame? What would you define shame as? The feeling of shame. Not being accepted. Can't do anything right. Feeling less than. Yeah. So let's examine that. Is it possible for a baby to be born as not enough? So you have to understand what would make a human enough. So let's say we decided we only wanted the babies that were enough to continue living. How would you decide which babies were not enough? Maybe some of those babies who were born prematurely, since they're kind of small. Would you say those babies are not enough? Let me know. How about the babies who are born with a cleft lip? Are those babies not enough? Let me know. Babies who are born blind or deaf, are those babies not enough? Oh, someone said absolutely not. It sounds really hideous to talk about babies that way, doesn't it? But those babies, if all those babies that I name are enough, then how long do they maintain that enoughness? Because they don't lose their enoughness when they grow up and they go to school, and they don't lose their enoughness when they mature into teenagers. They continue to be enough at 16, and they continue to be enough at 26. They were born enough. So is there really such thing as a human that was born as not enough? I'm blinking so you know this is not frozen. I'm just waiting. Of course not. There is no such thing as a human that is born as not enough. So the idea that you are not enough is a false idea because you are a human and you were born a baby. And when you came into the world, you were born as enough. And then when you went in the first grade, you were still enough. And when you went in the second grade and third grade, all the way up to being a teenager, you were still enough. And you were still enough when you got your first office job, and you were still enough when you got fired. You were still enough when people made fun of you. You were still enough when you tripped and you fell in front of everyone and they all laughed. You're still enough when you failed your tests. You're still enough when you got your divorce. You were born enough. You don't lose the enoughness. You don't lose your worth. You don't lose your value until the day that you die. Feeling not lovable is how some people describe shame, feeling less than. But you go back and you do the same thing. Worthy, not enough, not lovable, not valuable. It's the same process when you go back. Is there any baby born who's not lovable, who cannot be loved by any human? Does that exist? No, doesn't exist. So sorry, you weren't born that way. Is there any baby that's born that's not deserving? That's not deserving of all the best? No. So I'm sorry, you weren't born that way. Is there any baby who's born unworthy? Point out all the unworthy newborns. The doctor ever said, "Oh no, ma'am, I'm so sorry, your baby came out unworthy. Come on, guys, let's go home." And they just dropped the baby on the floor and they left? Doesn't exist. The team works tirelessly, making sure the baby's good, making sure it has everything it needs. If they need to put little baby test tubes in the nose, anything they need to do, give a little baby CPR. They're doing all this for the little baby who's accomplished nothing. You know why? Because they better, because the baby is born good enough. So, what excuse can you give me to carry around any further this dark, worthless, satanic notion that you are not enough? What excuse can you give me to continue to carry around this terrible, psychopathic notion that a human could not be enough? I'm sorry. You have no excuse. I know it could be inconvenient. This could be bad news to your entire belief system. But I have to let you know the truth. You were born enough, whether you like it or not. Deal with it. You were born lovable, like every other baby on earth. Deal with it. You maintain these qualities your entire life. So, what made you believe the falsehood? What made you believe the wrong thing? Parents, culture, caregivers made you feel like you had to prove your worth. But we know that's not real, isn't it? Because that baby who was just born didn't have to prove any worth. Everyone's in the room. Everyone's excited. Everyone's gathered. Soon as the baby's born, dad's on the phone. Yeah, mom. Okay, yeah, it's here. It's here. Everything's great. And the baby did nothing to prove its worth. The difference is that some of those babies will go home to parents that will continue to remind the baby of the truth through its life and will say, son, daughter, you don't have to do anything. You're already worth it. And some will go home to parents that made you feel like you were not worth it, like there was something you had to do to be lovable. And in that case, the shame is not on you. The shame is on the parents for failing to make sure you understood to the deepest part of your soul that you were everything lovable, that you were wonderful, that you were worthy. Shame is unacceptable. Toxic shame, we're talking about. It's unacceptable. Do you understand? It's done. Let it go. Take a deep breath and just let it out. You're wonderful. You're worthy. You're lovable. You're everything good. You're born that way. You're born that way. So deal with it. Deal with it. Now you must go forward into the world, understanding that you are worthy all the time. It's not dictated by how someone treats you. You understand? Some people will take a baby, a mother will take a baby and throw it in the dumpster. You've heard of this before. It happens. So do you go and look at the baby and then see it in the dumpster and go, well, if someone threw it away, it must not be worth it. Clearly, if someone threw the baby in the baby must have done something to deserve this treatment. Is that what you would do? Is that what you would say? If you were there, you saw a baby in a dumpster? Is that what you would come up with? Of course not. You would slap someone who came up with an idea like that. But this is the way you talk about yourself. Well, they treat me like I'm not worthy, so that makes me feel like I'm not worthy. Someone treats a baby like they're not worthy, you suddenly feel different about the baby? No, it's ludicrous. Let it go. Let's update our belief system. What is the more healthy belief? Well, a baby is not how it's treated. Its worth is intrinsic. Oh, maybe it's the same for me. Just I'm a baby, just plus 30 years, plus 40 years, whatever, right? Okay, good. So where does your worth come from? I was born with it. Good. So does it have anything to do with how people treat you? No. Your worth doesn't come from how people treat you. It's not less because you're a woman or because of the color of your skin. It's not less because of your income or because of the country you're born in. None of that has anything to do with anything. It's not how you're treated. You were already born lovable. You were already born worthy, right? So here's shame. Throw it away. It's worthless. Just have none of it. Have none of it. So what about guilt? Because Roman, as a person, I feel guilty. People tell me, hey, you should have been there at your grandpa's funeral. And I'm like, yeah, but my grandpa was a pedophile. And people are like, come on, man, don't hold that stuff against him. I feel guilty. Are you someone who's controlled by guilt? Your parents just have to say the right thing. Your boss just has to say the right thing. Your kids just have to say the right thing. And then you're just gonna perform and okay, 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 okay. I feel bad. I feel bad. I feel bad. Is that how you're controlled? By guilt? Let's understand what guilt really is. Guilt is a feeling that you feel inside yourself and it hurts, right? It's an unpleasant sensation. Like all emotions that are unpleasant, it is an indication that something has violated your values. Guilt is an indication that you have violated your values. When we feel upset, like angry at someone else, it's because we feel that they have violated our values. Guilt is an indication that you have violated your values. If you're not clear on this or you didn't know that before, go ahead and write that down in your notes. Guilt is an indication that I have violated my own values. You had beliefs, you had standards that you wanted to live up to. You had a person that you wanted to be. You had morals. And then you did something that violated those morals. So if you did something that violated the morals, isn't it good to feel a little bit of like negative sensation? Kind of like an internal punishment system? Yes, to a degree, of course. When we do something that we feel is wrong, we have an internal punishment system, and that's our guilt. We get a release of a chemical automatic in our bloodstream, like cortisol. It makes us feel bad. We go, oh God, I feel terrible for what I've done. I can't believe I said that thing that hurt her, or I hurt him that way, or I cheated her that way. We feel bad because we did something that was bad in our mind. It was awful. It was less than what we would strive to be. Guilt is healthy, but you need to understand it is not totally out of your control. Yes, it is on an automated system, the system of the subconscious mind, which is running all of the emotions, but guilt is not totally out of your control. You are not beholden to it. So stop being submissive to your emotions. Stop being submissive to your emotions. You are in charge. You, the conscious being, the being that decided, I'm going to log into this Zoom call. I'm going to go on this TikTok live. That being needs to run your life. Allowing the subconscious to run your life will lead you straight into train wreck, mental illness, physical illness, and everything bad in your life. Emotions are there as indicators to you, but the emotions work for you. It's your team. The fear is like your bodyguard, right? The emotional system is like secretaries. I like to look at the guilt as like an accountant. It's letting you know when you've spent too much, when you've gone too far. So if you had an accountant that worked for you, he was on your staff, and he talks to you, sir, I'm sorry to tell you, it looks like we've gone over on our budget a little bit. And if you continue doing this, then we're going to run out of money by X amount of time. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, oh my God, my accountant has spoken to me. Now I know that I'm unfit to lead my company. Is that what you're going to do? You're going to give up the company? Are you going to go to the accountant, hand him the keys to the safe? Listen, I'll just be an employee here. You run my company. Is that the way a CEO would properly act when the accountant has some bad news for him? No. A proper executive or CEO would listen to the accountant, right? He would say, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, I hear you. I hear you, Bob. All right. Let me think about this. I'm going to make the necessary changes. You're right. You're right. We are spending a little bit too much. And I'm glad you brought this to my attention. And as painful as it is to hear, I'm probably going to have to make some cuts. So I'll make the necessary changes, Bob, and I'll get back to everyone on my decision. Right? That's how a proper CEO responds to their accountant, right? That's what your guilt is. Your guilt is your accountant. It works for you. It works for you. It's God given to be there for you. So when you have the guilt, you don't want to go, oh my God, this is terrible. And quickly run to the alcohol, quickly run to the drugs, quickly run to the television, quickly turn on the Netflix, turn on the Amazon, turn on the Hulu, turn on the Peacock, turn on the Disney Plus, quickly put on the music. We got to get the Spotify. We got to get the Apple Music going. Quickly, 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 go outside, get in front of people, friends, 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 quickly eat, eat, eat. Oh, I feel guilty. Don't distract yourself because then you'd be like a CEO that does that. The accountant comes in and says, sir, it looks like we're on a bad track with our spending. And the CEO, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. That's what you're doing when you run from your guilt. So don't run from the guilt. Don't distract yourself. Don't become overwhelmed and laud it as your God and allow it to control you. It is your assistant. It is your accountant. Listen to it. You're right. Oh, I feel that. Oh, I feel bad. All right, all right, all right, all right. I'm gonna make the changes. But then by the next day, the CEO he comes in, he's got a new plan, and he lives a new life, right? He's he's not gonna if the accountant keeps coming back, it's like, yeah, I've already made the change, sir. Thank you. You're good. Get back to accounting, but you're doing what you do. You understand? The CEO doesn't sit in it. He makes the necessary changes. He takes the accountability. He takes the responsibility. He's in power. That's how you must respond when your guilt speaks up. You need to listen. Now, how do you listen to guilt? The way we listen to emotions is through meditation or deliberation, according to the 4Ds. So you pay attention with meditation, pay attention to the guilt. What am I feeling right now? This hurts. I'm feeling guilty. Why am I feeling guilt? Okay. I'm feeling guilt because I didn't call my mom on her birthday, or because I don't want to call my mom on her birthday. And that makes me feel guilty. Good. Okay. So let me write it down on a piece of paper, just the same way I would take notes if my accountant was talking to me. Okay, good. I don't want to call my mom, and that makes me feel guilty. Good. Now, let me examine this situation. Is it proper for me to feel guilt in this situation? And if so, how much guilt and for how long? Who's supposed to decide all that? You, you, you're the one. The CEO has to decide when you'll feel the guilt, how long you're going to feel the guilt, how long you're going to, well, it happens automatically, but you got to decide if you're going to go with it or not. How do you decide that? Work it out on a piece of paper. Just sit down and meditate. The deliberation, the meditation on it only has to take a few minutes. And as you think about it, you're going to analyze. You're going to analyze. I want you to have analytical thinking. And you analyze it, you say, what is the basis for this guilt? And examine all of the evidence that the reasons why you should feel the guilt, and then write down on the other side of the page all the reasons you should not feel the guilt. That's analyzation. You're questioning it. It works like this. Listen carefully. Why do I feel the guilt? I'm writing down. Okay, because I'm not calling my mom. Good. Now, why is that bad? It's violating my values. Why is that bad? Well, because You're supposed to call your mom on your birthday. Okay, that's a should statement. What? Who says? Who says you're supposed to call your mom on your birthday? Well, my mom says that. That's what my parents always told me. All right, let me write that down. My parents will tell me. Who else says that you gotta call your mom, even if she's abusive, on her birthday? My brothers and sisters. Okay, let me write that down. My brothers and sisters say it, and they're actually controlled by the parents, so that's kind of the same thing. Okay, yeah. And who else is telling me you have to call him? Who else says that's not a law in the United States or whatever country I live in? So where am I? I guess culture, kind of like a societal culture thing. So you write that down. Culture tells me I have to do this. My parents, and by extension, the flying monkey brothers and sisters tell me I have to do this. Do I have any other basis, any other reason to feel guilty? No, these are the ones who say that this is the case. Okay, good. Now let me look at the other side of this. Why would it be justified to not call my mom on her birthday? Well, because I cut her off, because I need to respect my decisions, and because my mom is toxic. And so any conversation could potentially turn abusive. And then that means it's going to mess up my mental health. That's bad for my mental health. Yeah. And that could hurt my physical health. That could make me relapse in my autoimmune disorders. Yeah. And I could get angry and say something I regret. Yeah. Yeah. And I could get angry or respond in a way. I could get triggered and I could get triggered and I could hurt someone. And I don't want to hurt someone, especially her. Yeah. Because I could really do that. Yep. And then so that would protect me and protect them because then I could go to jail if I end up hurting someone. Yep, yep. And I've been working on my healing now for 6 months. Yep, I'm 6 months in, and that will sabotage 6 months of healing. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And it could reinforce her bad behavior because in reality, she hasn't done anything to take any accountability for anything she's done wrong. So, yeah, okay. And as I do that, I don't want to reinforce the bad behavior. That'll just teach her that she can continue to walk all over me. Oh, yeah. Also, that speaking of that, she won't respect me. Yep. And she'll just use the same reason to do it again that I have to call her again next year. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that will make me easier controlled, and I don't want to be controlled anymore. And what just happened? Wow. Well, as I examine the evidence on this side of the page, I got like one reason to be guilty, and on this side of the page, I got like a million reasons to not. As I examine the evidence, I realize there's no basis for my continued guilt. And from here on out, I declare I shall not be guilty. And will you really feel less guilt? Yes. Does this really work? Yeah. Is it really that simple? Mhm. Yeah. Once you recognize, consciously or subconsciously, once you recognize that there is no basis for guilt, the guilt disappears. Your guilt is an internal system that's working for you based on your values. Once you recognize that you're actually not in violation of your own values, then your guilt will disappear and it will be instantaneous. Does everyone understand how to do that? So now that you understand how to manage your guilt, you actually don't have to fear guilt. So you can go ahead and make your decisions in your life that are going to be best for you, understanding that sometimes some of the hard decisions we make as grown-ups are going to hurt other grown-ups. And we're sad to know that. We're sad to know that. We don't want to hurt anyone. But if it does hurt someone, we ultimately have to do our work on our piece of paper to examine the evidence as why we should feel guilty or why we should not. When we come to that decision, we stand in our decision and we move forward. The guilt will disappear once we recognize why we are justified in our decision.